Hey there, I'm Mark from Spectrum Pulse, and today we have from fka Twigs, Eusexua. So here's something that as a critic is way more frustrating than it should be. An artist or act, they change their sound in a way that finally connects with you, and all the critical acclaim starts to make sense. You might like but not love their earlier work, but this feels truly special. You get it. You're all on board the hype train. And then the next project's coming out, and they seem to be doubling down on what made it work on the previous project, and yet even amidst the critical acclaim, something isn't clicking for you again, and it's maddening. It's the feeling you got it, then you lost it. And worse still, you understand why all of it's happening along the way. It's just not working this time. And by now, you can probably tell I'm talking about fka Twigs, because while I respected LP1 and Magdalene, it was Capra songs that felt so damn special, mostly because it took her cerebral experimentation and gorgeous voice in R&B and gave her production and a thematic arc that allowed her to lean into a looser, more organic framing, where she sounded more comfortable and inviting than ever. It reminds me a lot of when progressive rock acts make their pop pivot, where all of their refined skills and the composition come to bear on a more streamlined formula, and you just strike that perfect balance. But then when the title track of this new album dropped with more of a techno dance edge, where the 2000s nostalgia began really ringing through, and I didn't quite like it as much as I wanted, I had this sinking feeling about Eusexua, which proved to be mostly justified. And it's extremely frustrating because not only do I get what she's attempting, I also understand exactly why it doesn't really fully work for me, and yet how it will work for so many other people. And for a change of pace, let's start off with lyrics and the concept, because Eusexua as a concept is pretty apropos for this sort of dance album. It's about transcendence, most often inspired by art and movement and dance and people, that moment of endless possibility in the void before the pleasure crashes in, the anticipation before the orgasm. In essence, it feels more like the humanistic ecstasy compared to the immense biblical weight of Magdalene, but then paired with the more personal framing of Capra songs. It kind of makes sense that this might feel like a culmination. And in that context, certain production choices kind of start to make more sense. fka Twigs' voice is gorgeous, it's her strongest asset, but contorted through waves of pitch correction and auto-tune, you get the impression that she's trying to synthesize that kinetic rapture of the boiler room, the pulse-pounding rave, and by extension, to try to share the emotional vulnerability that comes in those moments where you shed everything and you're willing to give everything for a partner, like on Sticky and 24-Hour Dog, especially when you get the later impression she's gonna face heartbreak because they can't match her passion and transcendence. And it places in context why fka Twigs highlighted the danger of Eusexua in interviews as well, where searching for that release and passion can become all-consuming and shockingly lonely on the closer Wanderlust, especially when you already struggle with being open with others and see the arc of the last two projects if you want all the very justified reasons as to why. But if I'm being brutally honest, while this thematic extrapolation makes sense, and I understand why so many critics have already made it, look, even if I buy it, it feels kind of shaky. It's not surprising that the dance and techno focus has this feeling like Twigs' most lyrically underpowered album to date, where on the bridge of Keep It, Hold It has the line, "Sometimes I feel like I'm not even trying," and that could be very revealing subtext, especially in comparison with the more worked over art school experimentation of previous albums. Hell, Childlike Things might have one of the catchier hooks in an MIA vein. It features a Japanese verse from Northwest of all people, but if I'm internally making a comparison to Hello Kitty by Avril Lavigne for how much it prompts my eye roll, and then acknowledging that the song is nakedly interpolating a song from Kanye West's Vultures, that's a really bad sign. But again, it did work on Capra songs. That was advertised as a mixtape because it was loose and ragged and easily her most freewheeling project, and again, the one I liked the most. But I also think it texturally flattered her way more. The devil's in the details, because this is where we get to the execution and where this project lost me a lot more than I wanted. Now, part of it is on me. I like house and trance and more melodic electronic music with more organic groove compared to the icier sides of techno and IDM. But as someone who grew up in the 2000s, I would struggle to call this that experimental with so many of the deliberate textural throwbacks. As someone who's mostly lukewarm on Arca's music the past decade, the lack of her warped warping contributions is kinda glaring, the buzzed out static is not a good replacement, and it's not saying it's bad. It was kind of a little uncanny to hear synths I'd normally associate with Aerion on Girl Feels Good with the oily pulse, and Keep It Hold It with the fragile elegance with some really nice subtle harmonies, until the painfully dry drums come in and shove Twigs to the back of the mix. And you know what, there are songs that largely work, like the thrumming title track or Sticky, but it feels more brittle and processed, and I'm gonna say derivative, nostalgic for a blown out electropop era of the mid to late 2000s, drawing inspiration from dance music a decade earlier that was a lot rougher than many remember, with every glitchy implosion, especially around Twigs' vocals, to produce more of let's call it a bratty affect, where I don't love the vocal chops on Sticky, but on Room of Fools and the refrain of Striptease, it kind of gets distracting how rough Twigs' delivery sounds. And yeah, I get the reason why, but I don't have to like it. And maybe it's just me. I think we're observing the stark limits of her longtime producer Koreless, who is credited on every song here, and across her catalog, he's rarely worked on my favorites, especially in comparison to Arca, or Nicholas Jar, or Wondertrix Point Never. I think that's kind of revealing that none of them are here. And I don't want to draw out the comparisons to Brat, especially when the better one might be to Carolyn Polachek and Desire I Want to Turn Into You, especially in many of the vocal runs, like on the horn-inflected outro of Room of Fools, especially after some really sterile drums come on, or on Striptease with the breakbeats around all the strings. But it has the feel of fka Twigs submitting within tones that don't flatter her voice as much as when she was able to bend them to accentuate a lot of her unique personality. It's where she sarcastically references pulling the vocals from the album's re-release on Wanderlust, where we actually get some gentle guitars, and while the vocals feel really over-processed, I'll say it, the harmonies at least come through, and what do you know, it's a pretty strong closing track. And you know what? If the vocals were pulled for a remix album, it wouldn't surprise me, but I don't think that dance album would be anywhere near as unique or special. I don't think it would do that well. And you know, I remember when some diehard fka Twigs fans really hated Tears in the Club with The Weeknd 3 years ago. They thought it was the obvious sellout move for the mainstream. I mean, I personally adore the song, but I understood their concern, and I really hate that this album, despite, again, being decent to good, it is the direct follow-through to that dread. Some of that might have been obvious from the Atlantic cosign a couple of years ago, so now for the proper album, you have to keep up with the times instead of for 2010's experimentation, but in the process, the concept feels really undercooked, the production and hooks are haphazard at best, and even fka Twigs' singing can feel at best compromised, and at worst, alarmingly shaky. If you're into electronic dance music, or you want to embrace the 2000s throwback that really is worshipping at the altar of blackout era Britney Spears or mid-2000s Madonna, you might have some more fun with it, more than I did. But if you're more of a fan of the challenging R&B or the electronic experimentation Twigs previously brought to bear, this might be a tougher sell. I don't know. Maybe there's some irony that where fka Twigs found transcendence so often on previous projects, for the album all about desperately searching for Eusexua, it feels even further away. At least for me. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you want to see more, please be sure to like, share, drop comments, subscribe. Yes, I know there's going to be backlash to this review, but folks, I really tried with this. I really wanted to love it as much as everyone else did. I loved Capra songs, and this, in a way, feels like the spiritual successor, and it does not click for me, and I really wish it would have. Like, again, as someone who was looking for a fallen alien or meta angel or Tears in the Club or jealousy, like, I'm just not hearing it. Hell, I'd appreciate another 2 weeks. But again, it is what it is. If you guys have comments on it, please leave them down there below, along with anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation. And hey, if y'all want to get involved in getting projects on my schedule, or just want to yell at me more directly on my Discord, or hell, support the channel, link to my Patreon is right over here, also YouTube memberships. Don't feel obligated. Tough times, I understand. The option's available. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.